of this and someone who's actually operating in the ONG space? Majid.
So I think it's been absolutely great panel, and credit to Fred and Nandan and the Atlantic Council for putting this meeting together that really gets into the core topics around energy and beyond just kind of high-level messages. And it's a great annual event in January every year here in the UAE in Abu Dhabi. So please come back. So I agree with everything that's been said. I don't actually think there's a conflict. I do think that, first of all, I agree very much with the hypocrisy point, as you put it, Aubrey, and I'll come back to that. I do think there does need to be education as well as support on de-risking that you mentioned. And I see it even in countries here in the Middle East. For example, here in the UAE, as we know, we've achieved the lowest cost solar energy in the world, just over a cent per kilowatt hour. There are other countries that we know in the region who have, feel, well, our cost per barrel of oil production is the same. We've got as strong a sun as they do. We should have a cent per kilowatt hour. Well, you don't have an Abu Dhabi credit rating, and you've got a bunch of other stuff going on. So actually, it's not that straightforward. So just getting over those basic structures and regulatory requirements and policy, I think that can and should be a lot more support from Western institutions that can help countries in the global South be ready for that capital that is otherwise available and should be. On the point of the hypocrisy you mentioned, or the need for the empathy, I think it was exacerbated even more last year when we had really a global energy crisis, certainly in Europe, because countries in Africa and elsewhere in the global South saw Europeans turn on coal factories, subsidizing energy at the point of consumption. I mean, massively. I mean, in London, my electricity bill was half paid by the government. They call it energy support, but, subsidy. And then scrambling around to places like Africa, Mozambique, Tanzania, trying to buy the LNG, the gas that they'd refused to finance for domestic use, as long as it's going to Germany and Italy, right? And so that really is like beyond a shock, I think, to these host governments in these countries. And they've been waiting. I mean, we have the Loss and Damage Fund finally announced after many years. But since 2009, there's been this pledge of $100 billion a year. OECD claims it may have been met last year. The jury's out. But they see Inflation Reduction Act, which is amazing, but it's all money at home in the US, $1 trillion maybe. Europe responds with its own version, some sort of a trade war in the name of climate going on, again at the expense of the global South. That's the perception. And then there's been this ideological opposition or animosity in Western financial institutions, major multilateral development banks and others, not only against oil, gas, nuclear, hydro. I mean, Europe utilizes 92% of its hydro capacity, okay? Africa, I think it's 4%, right? But European NGOs lobby against it because, they have this somehow idealized view of a river in Africa, and human building a dam is just evil and might mess up my whitewater rafting or whatever, let alone ignoring the local development benefits. So they've been against that as well, right? So it's only solar and wind, and we mentioned the challenges around that. What happens when the sun isn't shining or the wind isn't blowing? They're going to burn coal, which is what's happening in China. We've got 200 coal plants under construction. India's going to expand their coal by 60% by the end of the decade. The two of them use 70% of the world's coal, and that's the main reason emissions have been going up since 2019. And I think, actually, Western policies, failure to fund natural gas in particular, to back up renewables, is a big reason why the developing world is burning more coal and emissions are going up. Plus we're having energy price spikes, plus we're having energy shortages. So we're failing on all three legs of the energy trilemma of availability, affordability, and sustainability. And then you have this issue going back and forth between sort of north and south. And that's, I think, a big part of what the UAE has been trying to bridge here at COP28 is actually being inclusive, yes, inclusive with industries and having all industries present, but really having the global south frame the debate up front and be consulted in the whole setting of the discussion here. And I'm hopeful for that.